All right, so welcome to today's pocket lecture. This is going to be the last in our series. And Allison's going to start us off with a little talk about Lupus Awareness Month, and then she'll bump it back over to me where I'm going to completely switch gears and talk about cheese making. With that,
we like to be unpredictable.
With that, I'll turn it over to Allison for her presentation.
So May is Lupus Awareness Month. And a lot of people have heard of lupus but don't really know what it is. So we're just going to share a little bit of information. Lupus is an autoimmune disease, which means that your immune system attacks your own organs and tissues instead of attacking invaders. There are a whole variety of autoimmune conditions, and some of them are rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, multiple sclerosis, and type 1 diabetes, among others. There are 4 types of lupus. Cutaneous lupus only affects the skin. Drug-induced lupus is caused by the use of a certain prescription drug and will usually go away after the drug is discontinued. Neonatal lupus affects newborns whose mothers have lupus. They have symptoms that usually go away by the age of 6 months. And then there's systemic lupus, or SLE. Systemic lupus is the most common form of lupus, and it's what most people mean when they talk about lupus. It can affect the skin, joints, and internal organs. And it commonly attacks kidneys, lungs, heart, but it can hit anywhere. What causes lupus? The answer is nobody really knows. There's speculation that there's a genetic component. It's been observed that autoimmune diseases tend to run in families. And then there are probably environmental factors that trigger the disease in those who have a genetic predisposition. There's a variety of theories, and it ranges from viruses to antibiotic use to chemicals in the environment. But there's no clear answer. Who gets lupus? Anyone can, but it's most common in women. They make up 90% of lupus cases. It's most common during childbearing age, so ages 15 to 44. And those with family history of autoimmune conditions are more likely to have lupus. It's particularly women of color get lupus 2 to 3 times more than white women. Symptoms include joint pain and swelling, which is something that most people get, extreme fatigue. Some people get low-grade fever and sun sensitivity. There can be a butterfly-shaped rash that goes across the nose and on the cheeks, sores in the mouth and nose, chest pain and shortness of breath that come from inflammation in the lungs and heart, and Raynaud's phenomenon. Raynaud's phenomenon can be a standalone thing. It's your blood vessels in your fingers kind of shut down and stop the blood flow. So they turn white or blue when you're either cold or stressed. It affects about 5% of women in cold climates. So it's not necessarily something to worry about, but if it's new to you, it's good to get checked out. Lupus varies from person to person and shares symptoms with a number of other diseases, which can make it really complicated to diagnose. If you ever watched the old show House, the running gag was that he thought every weird disease that came through was lupus, and it was just never lupus. Most lupus patients have cycles of flares and remissions, so they'll be fine sometimes and then really sick others. Lupus is an invisible illness, which means you can be experiencing intense pain and fatigue and still look completely okay on the outside. So the one phrase that people with lupus really hate to hear is this one: but you don't look sick. Diagnosing lupus is complicated. There's not one test that definitively says you have lupus. If they suspect it, you're usually referred to a rheumatologist. The doctor will look at symptoms, your family history, and blood and urine tests when deciding on a diagnosis. So that means many people wait months or even years for diagnosis. Lupus can't be cured, but it can often be controlled. Medications include NSAIDs, corticosteroids like prednisone, immunosuppressants, antimalarials, which you've been hearing about a lot in the news lately, and biologics. And basically, there is no medication that was specifically developed for lupus until just a couple of years ago. Now there's one. It's adapted from chemotherapy drugs or drugs that are used in transplant patients, and it's all about suppressing the immune system to keep it from attacking you. To help minimize the risk of flares, people with lupus should do what everybody does to keep healthy, which is avoid the sun, avoid stress as much as possible, eat a healthy diet and exercise, get plenty of sleep, and keep up with medical appointments. Lupus can have a significant impact on a person's quality of life. Chronic pain and fatigue can make work and socializing complicated. About 25% of patients become temporarily or permanently disabled, and it can have a big financial impact. This information by the Lupus Foundation says that it's costs more for handling lupus than rheumatoid arthritis, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, or asthma. So what you can do to help: be aware of the symptoms in yourself and in others, because the earlier the disease is caught, the better the results. Be patient with any friends or family that have lupus. They can't necessarily know how they're going to be doing on a certain day and can't always make plans, and they may not be able to do the same kind of things that other people can do. You can be an advocate and fight for legislation that includes lupus research, or you could donate to the Lupus Foundation of America or similar organizations that help lupus patients and their caregivers. The Lupus Foundation's goal for this May was to make lupus visible.
Completely different topic, but here we go. So yeah, I'm going to talk today about how to make farmer's cheese. So first, what is farmer's cheese? It is a mild, fresh cheese made without using rennet. And it's extremely simple to make. You just introduce an acid to a milk. It's very similar to paneer or queso fresco. There's some mild differences in how you make them. In this recipe, I use vinegar. For paneer, you'd probably use a lemon juice or a lime juice. It's pretty versatile. You can have it be crumbly, or you can shape it to be more dense. So you can do a lot with it. And I have down here fofu, and that is because the person that taught me how to make this, that's what he called it, because if you make a dense cheese, the texture is kind of like tofu, and it really takes on the flavor of anything you introduce to it. It's on its own, it is extremely mild to flavorless. So you do want to flavor it with something. So that's what we're looking at making today. So how do you make it, and what do you need? You need milk. I will say I don't have any recipes. I'm not sure how this works with non-dairy milk. I've only ever used it with cow's milk. So you can use any percentage that you like, any type of milk that you like, as long as it's not ultra pasteurized. The ultra pasteurized stuff is the stuff that has the really long shelf life. It's usually in the light block bottles. Don't use that, but pretty much your standard dairy milk will be fine. White vinegar, you need some cheesecloth or a muslin towel, and something to strain it with. In this case, I also have a bowl because I was going to reserve the whey. But really simple: milk, vinegar, strainer, and some sort of cloth to strain through. So to make it, you heat your milk gently over medium heat because you do not want it to scorch or burn. So it can take a little while just to heat it, being just on medium. What you're looking for is for the milk to start having foamy bubbles all over it, but you don't want to let it go to a full boil. So that stage just before it's going to boil is where you want to stop. I will say I usually don't measure anything with this. I kind of make it when I'm going to use up excess milk. And for this presentation, I used a quart of milk, and it yields about a little under 8 ounces of cheese. So this was a quart of milk in this pot, heating it over medium, looking for those foamy bubbles to start covering the top. When you reach that foamy bubble stage, you're going to introduce the white vinegar. And again, I usually don't measure. I usually just pour. It's probably a tablespoon or two. In this case, for the quart, I did measure it, and I use 1/8 of a cup of vinegar. Soon as you introduce that vinegar, it's going to start to curdle the milk. You'll give it a little bit of a stir, and you're going to turn the heat off. And then you're going to let it sit. And that's going to allow the curds to really separate from the whey. A lot of people like to flavor this cheese with herbs, with fresh herbs. So if that's something you like, a lot of people will chive or parsley or some, things like that in it. If you have any finely chopped herbs, this would be the point to add them to your pot, so it'll help bind to the cheese after you strain it. So you sit for about 15 to 20 minutes, let those curds really separate out, and then you will strain it. Typically, while I'm waiting for those 15 minutes, I'll prep my straining station, which is just cheesecloth doubled over. I usually have it damp so it sits nicely in the bowl of the colander. I put that over a bowl. You could do it directly into the sink. Then you just pour it all in there and drain it out. It will be hot because it was just on the point of boiling. So once it's, you still want it warm to hot, but when you can handle it without hurting yourself, give it a good squeeze and get whey out of there. And this is pretty much done. This is when you make more decisions about flavor and shape once you have it strained. So if you do like a crumbly cheese, you can just stop here. This would be really good to sprinkle onto salads. If you mixed it with, I think if you mixed it with like cilantro, it'd be really good on tacos or nachos. It's extremely bland, again, really, really mild. So I would put maybe some salt in or something like that. But if you like a crumbly cheese, you can just stop here. If you like it crumbly but a little bit wetter, you can take a couple spoons of the whey and mix it back in. If you don't want a crumbly cheese, you could also turn this into a cheese ball. And then you would just wrap it into a ball shape in the cheesecloth, tie that over a wooden spoon, hang it over a bowl and pop it in the fridge for a few hours and let gravity do the work, and you'll have yourself a cheese ball that you can serve with crackers, or you can, depending on how much whey was left in it, you might be able to spread it out, or you could just kind of cut little chunks out to go with crackers or whatever else you want it with. But the thing that I like to do the most is make a disc in the cheesecloth and then press that between two plates with some sort of weight on top. In this case, that is the jar of whey. So again, you can see I used a quart of milk and got almost a quart of whey out. You'll always have more whey than curd, but it makes a really good weight, and you can use it for some other things, or you can compost it. So in this case, I used the whey as a weight on top of the plates to press that disc down. I popped it in the fridge for a few hours till it kept its shape, and then I cube it up and I marinate it, because again, it's tofu, so it will take on those flavors of pretty much any marinade you can think of. It'd probably be really good with curry or teriyaki, but my go-to is this kind of completely unmeasured mix of soy sauce, olive oil, garlic, pepper, a little bit of lemon juice. Sometimes I'll put ginger in if I have it. I didn't have it this time. And I just toss that up and it'll seep right into that cheese. And I'll just pop one of those cubes for a snack, or cut them up a little smaller and put them on salads. And it's really delicious. So this is the full recipe, but really it's 3 steps. Heat the milk, put in the vinegar, and strain it. And then you can kind of play around with different flavorings and different textures. But it is the simplest cheese that you will ever make. We'll also have this up on the YouTube page afterwards, so you can rewatch it and take a screenshot or pause where you see the full recipe if you'd like. And that is how you make farmer's cheese. Does anyone have any questions about it?
So what are some things you would do with the whey?
So there's 2 different types of whey. This is going to give you an acid whey. Sometimes when you make cheese with rennet, or if you make yogurt, you'll get a sweet whey, which has more edible uses. The acid whey has a few lesser uses, but you can use it a little bit as a meat tenderizer. You can add it to some types of bread doughs or pancake batters. I pretty much I save it because I don't know how wet the cheese is going to be, so I save it so I can make it the texture and the amount of moisture in it that I want. And I usually will just compost it because it's really good for composting since it has so much acid in it. There's a bunch of things online that I've not tried, but I've seen about using for skincare and hair care, but I'm not going to recommend that because I've never tried it, but you'd be welcome to research that on your own if you do make this and want to see what you can use your whey for. But there's also some recipes that you can kind of add it to lemonades or smoothies, but I think more people do that with the sweet whey than the acid whey. So for me, I reserve it so I can add it back to the cheese, and then I typically just compost it. Any other questions?
So if you made it with, what did you say, rennet?
Right, and you wouldn't use rennet. Rennet is a agent that's for other types of cheese. So most other cheese will use it. There's animal-based rennet and vegetable-based rennet, and that's going to help with the curdling process. And it's usually used for aged cheeses as well. Although I guess it does. I think you can use rennet in mozzarella too. But it's it's an agent that you can add in, and I'm not fully an expert on it, but my understanding is it's a different level of bacteria and probiotic that determines whether it's going to be more acidic or more of the sweet whey. But you wouldn't use rennet in this recipe. You just need that acid. But you could also switch up the acid in this and try it with a lemon juice or lime juice instead of the white vinegar if that's what you have on hand.
And balsamic vinegar, do you think? Balsamic?
I've never tried it with balsamic or cider. it'd be worth a shot. I've never seen a recipe using it. The worst thing that happens is it doesn't work. So try it with a small amount of milk. But you might get a little more flavor too. This doesn't come out tasting like vinegar at all. It's like watered down milk or just nothing at all when you have it without a flavoring to it. So I'm not sure if like a cider vinegar or a balsamic would add a little more flavor to the cheese on its own.
Probably be a different color, huh? Which might be why people don't. It might be kind of a brownish.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Kate, question, which I just forgot. Dang it. Nope, it's gone.
It's
Okay, never
gone.
mind.
All right.
I'll ask you later.
Okay.
it's been that kind of day.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Oh, I remembered my question.
Okay.
Is it possible to add too much? Like, what happens if you accidentally, because you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what you're looking for, add too much whey back in?
Just
Does it
squeeze
just
it back
make
out.
like a really soupy cheese, or is it?
I would just squeeze it back out or drain it again. So if you were in that crumble stage and you put like a cup of whey back in, it's not going to immediately turn the whole thing liquid. So if you see right in the bowl that it's too liquidy, just put it back in the cheesecloth and give it a squeeze. Or just set it in the colander and let the extra drain out. It's only going to absorb so much. It's not going to re-liquefy.
And will it like continue to kind of dry out as it, like if in a couple of days, will it be drier?
Yeah, because it does need to be kept refrigerated, so that cold air is going to dry it out further. Oh, and I should say, I have it in the bottom of this recipe that it's a super fresh cheese with no aging and no like preservative of any kind, so it will only last up to a week. So I don't recommend making huge batches of it. But yeah, it will get a little bit dry. I wouldn't keep it like just on a plate in your fridge either. I would definitely keep it in a covered bowl or something so you can keep it sort of airtight. But it's pretty good in any form.
Thanks.
No problem.